There were statement wins and teams feeling the pressure. The big bump that has the footy world talking, plus Lloydy's mid-season All-Australian team. All that and more coming your way. This is Access All Areas thanks to Crypto.com.
Stewart not often a goal kicker. He tumbles it straight. There's the arc, he runs. He strikes it beautifully.
Normally good. Oh, he's great. He's not just good. He's a superstar, this kid.
It's Pickett.
He's going to score.
He's done it in a grand final against the Giants. And now he's kicked the winner.
Great to have your company on a Monday. Damian Barrett and Matthew Lloyd join me as always. Welcome, boys.
Thanks, Nat.
Let's get started. The Bombers, they got out of jail. They move into the top six after a thrilling win over the Kangaroos yesterday. It was a cracking game, and Massimo D'Ambrosio will get all of the plaudits after kicking the winning goal as the super sub. But, Lloydy, there's someone else you want to highlight here.
Jake Stringer I want to highlight. So, obviously, the ball goes out. Snelling gets it out to D'Ambrosio. I want to look at it again, and Jake Stringer's been a wonderful recruit for the Bombers. He's really lived up to his end of the bargain despite a lot of scrutiny. But that first smother and then this pressure, just saw the glint in his eyes. So often you see the highlights of him bursting out of a stoppage or kicking a big goal. But that's the best I've seen him in terms of his intent to help win a game a different way.
Yeah, and the point that made by Brad Scott post-match was pretty profound, I thought. There's only 5 players who'd played 100 games, he being one of them. And sometimes, as ugly as it was for Essendon, you've just got to get those wins banked, don't you? And they did, because they still can keep alive what they want to be a pretty sizable outcome for the year.
I agree with that. Like, even Collingwood's win, against North and against Westgate weren't amazing, but you can't win pretty and amazingly all the time. You just got to tick off the wins at this time of year and build them up to work towards September.
Well, for North Melbourne, it was another heartbreaking loss. There was so much to like, though, because they lost Greenwood, they lost Simpkin, and it was the young kids, Damo, Sheasel, Phillips and Wardlaw. There's so much to like about them.
No, there is, and we're just going to isolate some highlights here, Nat. Obviously, watching Wardlaw get those clearances, watching Sheasel now settle into his new midfield role. Phillips has been good in, or at least, sorry, I won't say good. He's starting to show what they thought in him some years ago when they took him early in the draft. And he had moments yesterday that were good and bad, but mostly good. So, yeah, you can see the future. But ultimately, Nat, they lost another game of footy that they could and should have won. And you go back 2 weeks ago and they lost a game through an off-field infringement on the interchange against Sydney Swans, and they lost this one yesterday when really they had done enough to win. And that might be a harsh outcome, Lordo, on what I'm saying there, because they are still in a developing team, but you've just got to get the wins when you can, and they're not.
Yeah, it's a bit of a changing of the guard. Like, I'm enjoying watching North Melbourne the last 3 weeks. You think about the Cunningtons, you wonder if he'll play again or he might just get a farewell game. There's been no LDU. No, Greenwood went out. Simpkin went
down yesterday too.
Yet they've discovered something. So sometimes through opportunity, you go, OK, this could be the future for us. So just keep giving them those opportunities. With LDU and Simpkin, that's an exciting midfield.
Yeah, and I know George Wardlaw's only played the 3 games, but gosh, he looks like some kind of player. Now, aside from the Roos and their young guns being must-watch, it was Rattan TV that I had the popcorn out for, because the interim coach was riding every single bump. This is him trying to get out of the coach's box, Damo, at some point. He's emotional, and I actually really like it.
Look, a month ago he was a 2-day-a-week person at North Melbourne Footy Club. Now he's the senior coach again, and look, he's got the experience in that of 2 previous clubs where the reactions aren't favourable when you broadcast that way. But look, that's his way of dealing with it. What he's done, though, is free up, I think, mentally what this club has been about.
Oh, they're a better team with Brett Ratton as coach, and that's the elephant in the room for... what about Alistair Clarkson? What was that doing to the players? Because the players looked like they weren't even trying. And everyone's going... Normally Clarkson sides are well organised, well drilled, hard to score against, but they were awful. Since Brett has taken over, they're a better football team.
Strategy-wise, Sheasel is one move. Is there anything outside of that, or is it just more the mental and the refreshing element of a person not burdened by the Hawthorn racism saga as Clarkson was?
Well, I thought Shields going to Merritt at quarter time, that changed the game yesterday. I think Wardlaw coming into the midfield. There has been the way they move the ball is better. I think they're not defending like a zone defence, which they were getting opened up by a lot of teams. So, yeah, there's been a fair few changes.
So I guess if Clarkson Clarkson doesn't come back, then they've got Brett Ratten there ready to take the reins, do you think, Damon?
Well, it was a safeguard, Nat, wasn't it? Again, we're jumping the gun, and no one at North Melbourne knows when Alistair Clarkson will come back, and he's got as long as he wants, and they'll deal with the AFL on how that looks from their soft cap component, because, as I said, Brett Ratten was at 2 day a week, maybe 3 days maximum under his deal on a part-time basis, and now he's full-time, invested, immersed in it to the point where he's leaving the box on bad moments in a game. So, again, Clarkson's back the moment he's mentally right to come back, but as you say, they're a better team without him in what Alistair Clarkson had been doing prior to him departing.
All right, well, let's get to Giant Stadium yesterday because it was an absolute thriller. The Tigers getting the job done over GWS. And Lloydy, that last quarter was insane because there were 12 goals kicked and it could have gone either way in the end.
Why I love this matchup is because they're all been learnt under Damian Hardwick. So the Giants played aggressive football. Like they were just running in waves. Richmond play the same sort of football. It's chaos-type football. So it was just end-to-end, goal-to-goal. Wasn't a lot of defence in this game, and it was a ripper game to watch. And I just want to highlight Marlon Pickett. I've been pretty hard on him. I haven't sort of loved his role in the forward line, but he had some big moments late in the game. Tim Taranto was big again. He was big in the ruck. I thought it was game over, but he was exhausted, the big fella in the ruck. Briggs. And then this crumb, you can't really teach that to players. That's just instinctive, and on the non-preferred, he nailed it. As did Prestia, which was a big goal just before.
It was, wasn't it? Yeah.
And former Richmond coach Damian Hardwick is clearly living his best life at the moment. He's over in the US in Denver, and then he's pretty active on social media the last couple of weeks, but he's got a few new members, Damo. What do you reckon about that?
As you say, there are 40 new members for the Tigers. You can just see the refreshment in his outlook, can't you, with what he's been doing, cracking beers at 10:07 a.m. the previous Sunday and overseas this weekend.
Is that the lifestyle he wants for next year as well?
No, it's not. No. That's temporary, Lloyd.
Okay.
He needs it to refresh from what he's been through, clearly, but I feel he will want to be back in the system as soon as next year. Okay.
Still on the Tigers, Liam Baker, Lloydy, was enormous in that final term as well. And he's shaping as one of Richmond's most important players, isn't he?
Oh, just a bargain recruit. Got him for next to nothing, really, with a rookie selection. And he's just a big game player. This was just courage personified. Like the big fella coming at him, Callum Brown, but didn't care. Just went straight through and took the mark. And he just poised. He just never panics. He's like Pendlebury in a sense where he's just made for the big moments. And left foot, right foot, he was awesome in this game as well.
Yeah, he certainly is a player, is Liam Baker, as Judson Clark gets a goal there, the youngster. So it was really good to see from that point of view at Giant Stadium yesterday, the Tigers getting the win. But the big talking point from the weekend was Jordan De Goey and that bump. Of course, the Collingwood star has been sent straight to the tribunal, Damo, for that head-high hit on Elijah Hewitt, which left him concussed. And he faces a minimum of 3 weeks on the sidelines.
Yeah, and if the Collingwood legal team can keep it down to 3 weeks, they're probably doing well. And I'm actually all for that. Lloydy, are you in deviation off 3 to 4? What are you?
Yeah, that's right. 3 to 4.
So let's go with 3. And look, this last year would have been a massive story for Collingwood. To me, it's just a small blip in the radar of Craig McRae and what they're about. It's not going to be ideal, him not being available, but they will get over it. And I think they can now do what Geelong did last year for injury reasons with Paddy Dangerfield. Give him and smash him through a mini pre-season within this period of time that he's out, have him back, and then give some opportunity to someone like I'd be kicking up for a Reece McInnes to get an elevated role now. They might have to replace Will Hoskin-Elliott and also Bo McCreary out of the same game. So there's 3 vacancies potentially. And I mean, Finn McRae's another one, Lauder, who could get a look in.
And they've got Lipinski, Elliott, McStay back as well. So they've got no issues. I think they're such a system-based side that a player going out, even if that quality doesn't affect... Look, they've had no ruck for most of the year.
Jeremy Howe went down in the first game.
They've managed that really well. But Chris, Nick Dacos, Mitchell, Pendlebury, Taylor Adams, Josh Dacos, Elliott, Lipinski, they'll be fine.
You don't look at that as though it's anything untoward, do you? I look at it as a footy act and it happens in a split second.
Look, I know you said it was just an accidental footy act. I just think it's dumb, to be honest, because in this day and age, what are you doing opting to bump for a second and then leaving the ground like that too? I just thought it was stupid, and I think if he had his time again, he wouldn't be doing that same act. Just in this day and age, with everything we've seen this year, I don't think it was necessarily malicious, but just silly.
Yeah. It's a different Lloydy to go on and off field this year, and I hope personally for him it doesn't cost him an All-Australian spot. We'll talk about your All-Australian team in a moment. I'm assuming he's in it at this stage, and I hope the 3 or 4 weeks he misses don't cost him that, but it obviously ruins his Brownlow hopes and that.
All right, on Saturday night, the Cats had a big win when it comes to the context of their season. They're back in the top 8, rolling over the top of the Dogs, and they've had their injury woes as well, but Lloydy, in the final term, it was their pressure that was back and that attacking game style that we like to see. They were back to their best.
Yeah, I thought the Dogs started the better side, but when I talk about Geelong in the mood they get in, so they were in the mood on Saturday night. So when they get in this mood where they get on the hunt and they get their ball movement going, they're scary for everyone. Everyone in the competition, that they can beat anybody. Like the Stengel, Myers, Close, Rowan, this tackling there from Blixarves. They're in the face of the Dogs, where the Dales and the Daniels don't like Bruins tackle, and then they're away. Myers. So to me, it's about how often. Obviously, they need their players back, but how often do they want to be in this mood across a whole season, or is it just up for one, down for another?
Yeah.
That's often what hits premiership sides, but they were right into it on Saturday night.
Their preferred midfield that got them through the back half of last year and the finals and the grand final, Lloydy. Stanley, Dangerfield, Holmes, who missed the grand final, Duncan, Guthrie, not available. Luke Beveridge didn't capitalise on that enough to get that result?
No, I just sometimes the frustration with the Dogs is there's so much talent there, but what players love is knowing their role, and obviously things have to change within games, but you're all predictable to each other, and sometimes Luke can throw things within a season. You go, wow, where did that come from?
In his defence, he had to change it after a 0-2 start, didn't he? So you give him a tick for changing it then.
It's different to change. OK, we're going to go tall. That's not working for us. Let's get Waitman back in. He was injured. Arthur Jones in. That's a change you have to make. But throwing lob to a wing,
you don't like it,
do you?
No, I just don't think. When's he ever played wing in his life before? And O'Donnell from nowhere into a forward line. That's selection integrity that other players might question. So that could derail seasons when you make strange moves like that.
To the Suns now, and Gold Coast have won 5 of their last 7 games. They're just outside the top 8 now on percentage after beating the Crows in Darwin. Damo, they were 35 points down and came back to kick 9 goals in a row. It showed real grit and character, didn't it?
And I mean, you've heard me that many times, probably more than most. I wanted to see it back to back, and we saw it now. Western Bulldogs last week. Adelaide Crows this week. Good teams, and they got the job done. I now go back to last year. They were 6-6 last year, which is what they are right now. They went to 7-6 last year, Lloydy, and still fell away. I'm still going to be a doubter until I have reason to not. But having said all that, seeing what they're doing in this, I mean, Roll didn't have his best game, still kicked that goal. Lukosius here, for the second week in a row, kicks 5 goals. King kicked 2 last week, 3 this week. You've got Bailey Humphries elevating himself into the bets, and Jed Anderson was best on ground. Noah Anderson was best on ground.
Dame and I have equally been as hard on this team, but they're winning. They just are gaining more and more respect, I think, in my eyes, because it takes time. It takes time. A lot of these guys haven't won a lot of football, but they're learning how to win big.
So they've got the bye, then Carlton and the Hawks, and then Pies and Port. So big couple of tests there at the back end of that month.
If they split those next 4, gun 2 and 2, I'll be still
fine.
on. Yeah.
Now, just on the Crows, because they are 5-2 when they play at home, 1-4 when they're away, and that one win came in Tassie against Hawthorn by 3 points. Is there a little bit of flat track bully about these Crows, Damo?
I think there is, yeah. I mean, I wanted to believe on the Crows, but I can't for that reason alone. And that one win away was in Launceston against Hawthorn. So, yeah, I'm now tempering expectations on the Crows. And while even as recently as the week leading into the game just played, I still felt if it all went well, they could be really high end. They're not. They're not going to finish top 4 now, and at best they'll get an elimination final to work their way through.
There was a dominant performance by Port Adelaide on Saturday against Hawthorn. Port are flying, but the Hawks, on the other hand, Lloydy, it was a pretty horrible first half when you look at what they did.
It was, yeah. So Port were awesome. Here's Dylan Moore. Port were awesome. Hawthorn were really poor. So it was a collective of both in a sense. So It's just the ease at which, you got. I think James Sicily has hurt his side by not playing, and then it puts a lot of pressure on a young defender like Weddle in this situation. I don't blame Weddle. I blame the midfield and the forward group who allowed for it. Here's Rioli. Like 5 players didn't go at him in that situation. So the question with Sam Mitchell is that balance between poor Weddle. He's under siege, going back away from goal, and then Rioli just strolls in and kicks a goal. But Sam's offensive game is really, really good, where they score heavy, but it's the defensive element that he's just got to be able to marry up with that offensive side. And here's Luke Bruce, too slow to react to Ryan Burton. You know what he's going to do with a handball receive. So they were right off, Port were right on, and that can happen to a young side at footy at the Adelaide Oval.
Of their 9 losses, 6 have been by 50 points or more, and there's been 2 by 80, 1 by 69, 3 by 50 noted.
I mean, that's what happens with a young side, isn't it? There are massive drop-offs in game, and in the second half, they, came back and they were very competitive. They kicked 8 of the last 10 goals of the game.
You're not trying to take anything out of that finish to the game, mate, surely.
Why not? There are some positives. You can't just look at all the negatives, Damo.
90 plus points down around the half-time mark. Not everything's positive now.
Well, we actually have a positive story now to talk about, and that was on Friday night because it was a big night for the Mackay family. You see, Harry, hears so much talk about his goal kicking. We've scrutinised it here on Access All Areas. But how about this? Because the family rides every single bump, and his mum here and dad just celebrating quietly after he nailed his first set shot. What do you make of that?
What I love most about that is that Carlton jumper that Dad's wearing has got the VFL logo on that.
That's very
positive.
good.
Do you know, I was talking to my wife Lisa about it. She said it's actually worse for the wife and the mother and the father than it is for the player, because the player's out there on the ground and, he's under a lot of pressure, but it's those who have to listen, the loved ones of you that have to listen to the abuse that you're copping. So you can imagine what their parents are listening to, what people are saying about Harry Mackay. So I admire them for sitting there amongst everybody. You could easily watch that from home and go, I don't want to be out there, but they just embraced it and took it in the right spirit.
Yeah, they certainly did. Now, Lloydy, we set you some homework at the weekend. We wanted your mid-year All-Australian team. So talk us through who was first picked in your side.
Obviously, Darcy Moore as the key back, Nick Dacos, 2 awesome players from the Collingwood Football Club. The Bont picks himself. Cameron and Curnow, they've dropped off a little bit in recent weeks, but I still... And Larky, Allen and Myercheck, I've loved their seasons as well, so they just got in. Isaac Rankin had a poor one on the weekend, but I think it's the hardest position on the ground to play, that small forward role. So Cameron and De Goey get that spot. Butters was first picked just about from a midfield perspective, along with Petrarca. And Darcy's influence on games. So there's a lot of talk around the other ruckman that you'll challenge me on, but I think his impact with his hit-outs to advantage, and his bullocking work was sensational. And Rosie Merritt picked themselves. Danaher has had a great season. Tim Taranto, it was only his weight of numbers now that I was critical early, but he just gets the job done week in, week out.
It's obviously a hard task, Lord. Nat and I got a few questions. Maynard and Redmond in the back line was what I submitted for what it's worth in my mid-year team to our collective AFL.com.au team. Could you mount cases for them?
You can certainly mount, and I want from you two the player that's going out as well.
I'd take Wilkie out for Redmond, but again, it's hard to justify that too.
I thought Wilkie was nearly the best defender in the first.
And Houston's had a really good season.
Charlie Ballard was the one for me who I think has been terrific one-on-one contest-wise. I do want to ask you about Sean Darcy though, because Tim English in particular off the Saturday night game against the Cats, he was terrific.
Yeah, that's fair enough.
Were you torn between having 2 potentially?
Tim is around the ground.
Yeah.
Love him, but in terms of the bullocking work inside, Darcy every day of the week.
And I had my check in too before the weekend. Could you mount a strong claim for him too?
He and Oscar Allen I would have loved to have found a spot for.
Captain? Who's your captain?
Darcy Moore, Vice-Captain Toby Green.
OK, well, just want to make all of our viewers aware, and thanks for doing that, Lloydy, but Tuesday next week is when we'll be back with Access All Areas. Obviously, the King's birthday clash between Collingwood and Melbourne will take centre stage on Monday, so we will be dissecting and unpacking all of that on Tuesday next week, so make sure you join us for that. Now, on our AFL social channels right now, we have our Access All Areas Extra, and Damo caught up with Giant Tom Green for a chat. Let's take a look.
Left ear?
Yeah.
Totally deaf?
Yeah, completely deaf in my left ear. It's something that I sort of realised when I was 12. We went through a bunch of tests and figured out what it was, and they think it's this virus which at the time wasn't I don't think it's that really well studied, called sudden hearing loss syndrome, and it wipes out the hairs in your cochlea, little ears.
You obviously learnt to live with it. Do you know how much it does set you back in what you're trying to do out there some days?
I don't notice it that much, but as I said, I think it's because I've become used to dealing with it. I mean, we have to set up the interview in a certain way so I can hear you a little bit better.
You said that.
And there's certain things like that. And I sort of notice myself, I'll walk on the left-hand side of a group so that I can hear everybody and that sort of thing when we're seated as well, or sit in certain areas so I can hear. So it changes little things like that, but I don't notice it too much. But some of my teammates might say they notice it when they're calling for me off the bench and I'm just running past. And
Great interview, Damo, and that one is available now to watch in full on our social channels as well as afl.com.au and the AFL Live app if you wish. And of course, he was absolutely terrific yesterday. Now, time now for our crypto bold play, and this was very, very bold indeed from Kat Brian Myers because I reckon this probably should have been a free kick. Yeah, left of screen. What do you reckon, Damo?
Well, I think by definition of the law, when you pull a player away like that, whether you get some assistance by the player himself, happily to be dragged back, but it's possibly borderline free kick, isn't it?
Because he got away with it, it's called bold. It would have been the most stupid play if it was a free kick and cost Blixabs a goal.
Yeah, it certainly did. All right, that is all we have time for today on Access All Areas. Don't forget, Tuesday next week, we will be back to unpack everything from the King's birthday. Have an amazing week.